Hey everyone, welcome to Three Crosses Farrier Company. We're trimming another draft hoof today, so let's get started. So one of the things I'd like to talk about today is hoof growth and how the seasons affect hoof growth. So where we're at right now, it's spring, it's warming up. The grass is, you can see in the back of this video, the grass is nice and green and luscious. And what that does is that horse's protein intake is now through the roof. So all through the winter, the horse is eating primarily hay, and depending on the hay, it might not be as high a protein. It's definitely not as high in sugar and protein as fresh grass. The other thing is that when it's cold, most of that protein and sugar is going to keeping the horse warm. So it's going to grow hair. It's going to keep her body temperature up. When spring rolls around, they no longer need their body temperature maintained. They don't need to grow hair. They're shedding their hair, and therefore they start to grow hoof, since the other bodily functions aren't needing that protein, and where that shows up is in the hoof. In extreme cases, can cause founder. Founder is basically diabetes for horses, and it affects their hooves. That's where it shows up most, but it'll also overweight, whatever. Lakota here is a fairly healthy horse, but you'll see, even though she's on a tight schedule, she's really long this time. Last time I was there, she was actually kind of short. So that's primarily due to the fact that the weather's changed. You can look at a horse's hoof and you'll see ridges running around horizontal to the hoof, and it can tell you whether they're sick, whether they're if they had a diet change. So a lot of what's going on in the rest of the horse's body can be seen in the hoof. So in this case, Lakota is super healthy, and you can see that the hoof growth is also super healthy. Now you'll notice all this flaky white stuff that I've been exfoliating out of this hoof. That's thrush. That's another byproduct of the spring. It's wet, it's muddy, there's all kinds of bacteria in the ground, and therefore all that dead tissue begins to decompose while it's on the horse's hoof. Horses in the wild don't have this problem because they travel a lot of miles a day. On average, a wild horse will travel around 20 miles a day, and this causes them to wear the hoof down and exfoliate by abrasion of walking along the ground. Now, you'll also see here that I'm pulling the heels back. Some people have gotten a comment or two on that. Why am I trimming the heel if I need more angle? A draft horse doesn't grow down, they grow forward. So the whole hoof will begin to move forward. So if I don't trim it back to where the back of the frog is, then her heels will begin to collapse. When I first started with Lakota, her heels were collapsing. And as you can see now, it's a fairly healthy looking draft foot.
Means I have a chance, right?
And now here you'll also see, again, I tell people all the time, we're trying to do this efficiently, so I'm going to take off that extra hoof wall on the outside with my nippers rather than my rasp. It's absolutely amazing how much hoof wall a draft horse has. I had a comment in the last video about, well, aren't we thinning down the hoof wall? No, because as long as we rasp the bottom 2/3 of the foot, the hoof wall will remain the same width. The hoof wall is basically from the top quarter of the hoof down, so from 3/4 of the hoof, so is the same width. The only time that it gets narrow is when it goes into the coronary band. This is how we can drive nails. So when we shape a shoe properly, we drive to that laminae wall, that discoloration right along the hoof wall right there that runs all the way around the inside, and we nail to that, and our nails go into the hoof wall. And there are markers, basically. Other people have asked, why don't I shoe Lakota? Lakota doesn't have a hard life at all. She doesn't work very hard, honestly. She sits and eats hay most of the time. So it's not necessary. The only time that we shoe a horse is when they need it, for several reasons. One would be protection of the hoof capsule, stabilization of the capsule. So if you have a horse that's being ridden a lot and is riding over roads or rocky ground, then you probably need a set of shoes to protect that hoof. Stabilization of the capsule. So if you have a crack or a split or something, we'll often shoe to protect and take pressure off that affected area. Pathology, disease pathology of the horse. Again, we'll shoe to correct problems. So like if a horse is lame and they have a low angle, so their coffin bone's in the wrong position and is putting strain and stress on their tendons, we'll often wedge them up. I still think this is the coolest idea I've had in a long time. I used to use vet wrap, and now I'm using saran wrap. It is actually easier to use. It gets everything out of the way. It works really well, and it costs nothing compared to vet wrap. You know, vet wrap's a couple of bucks a roll, and this is, I think, a total of $10 a roll, and it'll last me for 3 months. Again, gonna run my nippers around the outside, save myself a little time. I have plenty of hoof wall. The other thing is that we're trying to do here is get rid of all that excess hoof. And we're getting rid of flare. Flare acts as a lever, and the ground being your fulcrum point, it causes the foot, the more flare you have, the worse it gets, because it's causing more and more strain on the hoof wall, and the hoof wall will begin to flare out or grow perpendicular to the hoof wall, and so it'll begin to flatten out rather than following the natural angle of the foot. So as we run our rasp here, we're not running our rasp straight up and down, we're running it in the same direction as the hoof wall would naturally grow when the flare isn't there. And a lot of guys will cheat this section. They'll try to 45 the toe or something else, or just rocker the toe, or roll their rasp around the outside of the toe. And I do roll my rasp around the outside of the toe, but it's really imperative that you get rid of as much flare as you can and get that foot looking natural and growing natural. Otherwise, that extra foot will act as that lever and will cause your flare to be worse and worse as time goes on. Again, I'm rolling that toe. Some guys call that a Mustang roll, where I ran my rasp around the bottom of the foot and kind of made a little bit of a bevel. I just call it rolling the toe. And I love the colors. When you get a foot cleaned up and finished like this, just look at how those colors start to show through the hoof. It's absolutely amazing.
You ought to put these videos up.
And that'll about do it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments.